Ethan Cross died, he didn't scream. He just stared at the ceiling of a cheap motel off Route 9, listening to the ice machine hum like a heartbeat that didn't belong to him. On the table sat a framed photo of a woman with perfect teeth, Leela Hart, smiling, as if she'd never ruined anyone in her life. He had once called her his wife. Now, he couldn't even call himself a man. 3 years earlier, Ethan had been the youngest partner at Cross and Vale in Boston. He wasn't flashy. He believed in patience, in building something real. The kind of man who still called his mom every Sunday. Then Leela walked into his life like a match in a dry forest. She was a consultant hired to polish the firm's image. She had a laugh that landed softly, like it knew secrets, and a gaze that made people feel chosen. Even Ethan found himself leaning toward her as if gravity had changed. Within 6 months, they were married. The first crack came on a rainy Tuesday when the SEC showed up at his office. They didn't come for the firm. They came for Ethan, insider trading with perfect timing, perfectly illegal. Transactions tied to his login, his signature, his digital trail. Ethan laughed at first. Then he saw the printouts. Every trade was real. Every timestamp matched. The paperwork was flawless, like it had been made by someone who knew exactly how to bury a person. Cross and Vale put him on leave pending investigation. Colleagues stopped meeting his eyes. News crawlers flashed his name in bold letters, and strangers called him a parasite. At home, Leela played devoted wife, wrapping him in warm blankets and warm words. "Babe, this is a mistake," she whispered. "We'll get through it." But at 2:14 a.m., Ethan woke for water and heard her in the kitchen laughing into her phone. "I told you," she said. "He'll be out by Friday." Ethan froze in the hallway, barefoot on cold tile. "Ethan's too trusting," she added. The next day he confronted her carefully, like you approach a wild animal. Leela smiled, calm as still water. "You're imagining things," she said. "Your mind is spiraling. You need help." Help. 2 weeks later, Ethan's accounts were frozen. His firm terminated him and released a statement distancing themselves from Mr. Cross's actions. Cross and Vale filed a civil suit against him, and in the middle of it all, Leela filed for divorce. Not quietly, publicly. She accused him of emotional abuse and addiction. She showed evidence, screenshots, bank records, even a blurry video of a man stumbling outside a bar. It looked like Ethan. It wasn't, but it didn't matter. The judge granted her a restraining order. Ethan wasn't allowed near the house he'd paid for. Within days, she emptied the joint accounts and moved into a condo listed under an LLC. When Ethan begged for answers, she finally dropped the mask. They met at a coffee shop near the courthouse. She arrived wearing black like a widow, even though he was still alive. "You don't get it," she said. "I wasn't taking from you. I was collecting what I deserved." Ethan stared. "What are you talking about?" "My father," she said. the man who lost everything in 2008. Your father's firm shorted his company. He drank himself into the ground. Ethan swallowed. That wasn't me. I was in college. Still across, Leela said, voice sharp. Still the same blood. I married you to see if you were different, he whispered. I never did anything to you. Leela shrugged. You benefited. Then she leaned in, eyes cold. And now you know what it feels like. If this is already twisting your chest, subscribe now, because what happens next isn't just a story, it's a warning. He called his mom that night, voice shaking. Mom, do you believe me? There was a pause on the line too long. Not because she didn't love him, but because the world had trained her to trust headlines more than her own son. Oh, Ethan, she whispered, broken. I don't know what to believe anymore. That sentence hurt worse than the lawsuits. It proved Leela's real talent wasn't theft. It was isolation. In the days that followed, Ethan replayed every moment of their marriage like a crime scene. The helpful way she offered to handle his passwords, the way she insisted on using her laptop, because yours is always slow. The nights she kissed him after his toughest meetings, then rolled over and typed quietly in the dark. He remembered her favorite phrase, said with a smile, trust is romantic. Now he understood what she meant. Trust wasn't romance to Leela. Trust was access. Still, part of him wanted to believe the USB was fake. A cruel prank, a stress hallucination. Then an envelope slid under his motel door. No stamp, no return address. Inside, a USB drive and a sticky note. She's not done, and you're not her first. Ethan plugged it in. A folder opened, heart cases, dozens of subfolders, names, dates, photos, men with wedding rings, and beside each name, one word in red, ruined. His breath caught. He clicked the first file. A video played Leela at a private dinner, laughing, clinking glasses. I don't just take money, she said. I take identities. It's cleaner that way. A man off camera asked, nervous. How many? Leela answered without hesitation. Enough. Ethan's stomach turned. If she had done this before, then her father's story was only bait, an excuse designed to make her cruelty look like justice. And if Ethan stayed quiet, he wasn't just a victim. He was an accomplice to the next man's destruction. That was the moral that hit him hardest. Evil doesn't need your approval. It only needs your silence. Outside, in the parking lot, a car door closed. Footsteps stopped right outside Ethan's room. The footsteps outside Ethan's motel room didn't move for a long second. They just stayed there, like someone deciding whether to knock or finish something they'd already started. Ethan held his breath. Then the footsteps walked away. Only then did he realize his hands were shaking so hard he could barely grip the edge of the bed. He locked the door, pulled the cheap chair under the handle, and sat back down in front of the laptop. The glow of the screen felt harsh now, unforgiving. The folder labeled heart cases was still open, like it was waiting for him to admit what he already knew. Leela Hart wasn't an accident. She was a pattern. Ethan clicked the next file. Mark Reynolds. 2019 Mark had been a real estate investor in Chicago. Married. 2 kids. The file showed screenshots of wire transfers, shell companies, forged emails. The ending was always the same: divorce, lawsuits, reputation destroyed. In one clip, Mark sat in a car, eyes hollow, saying, "I don't even recognize my own name anymore." Ethan felt sick. He moved to the next folder. Julian Parker, 2020, a tech founder, accused of data theft. His company collapsed in 3 weeks. The note said, blamed himself. No retaliation. Another, David Fletcher, 2021, suicide. Ethan slammed the laptop shut. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't justice. This was something colder, more calculated. Leela didn't just destroy men. She studied them, learned their weaknesses, used love like a weapon because it left no fingerprints. Ethan stood up, pacing the narrow room. For the first time since his arrest, since the headlines and the shame and the silence from people who once called him family, something else rose inside him. Not hope, clarity. Leela had miscalculated one thing. She assumed Ethan would break quietly. She was wrong. The next morning, Ethan went somewhere he hadn't stepped into in years, a public library. No cameras tied to his name, no Wi-Fi he owned. He bought a prepaid phone with cash and created a new email address that didn't resemble his name at all. Then he wrote one message. To the sender of the envelope, "Who are you?" The reply came faster than he expected. Someone she almost erased. They agreed to meet 2 nights later in a diner off the interstate. Neutral ground, bright lights, too many witnesses for Leela to be comfortable. The man waiting in the booth was older than Ethan, mid-40s maybe, with tired eyes and a scar running along his jaw. "My name's Nathan Cole," he said. "Or at least, it used to be." Nathan slid a folder across the table. Inside were court documents, private investigator notes, and photos of Leela meeting men who weren't Ethan long before and long after their marriage. "She doesn't just marry," Nathan said quietly. "Sometimes she pretends to. Sometimes she just gets close enough." "Why didn't anyone stop her?" Ethan asked. Nathan laughed without humor. "Because she never breaks the law directly. She bends people into breaking themselves." Nathan leaned in, and because most men are too ashamed to admit they were outplayed. That sentence landed hard. Ethan realized then how Leela survived so long. Shame was her shield. Silence was her ally. "What do you want from me?" Ethan asked. Nathan didn't hesitate. "I want her exposed, and I want you to understand something before you decide." He tapped the folder. "She doesn't lose. Not unless you're willing to lose more than she expects." Ethan thought of his mother's hesitation on the phone, of the way his name now sounded dirty when people said it, of the future he'd imagined gone. "I've already lost everything," Ethan said. Nathan shook his head. "No, You've lost your comfort. There's a difference. That night, Ethan went back to the motel and reopened the laptop. He watched every video, read every note. He studied Leela the way she had studied her victims. He noticed patterns. She always kept a backup account in someone else's name. She always recorded herself, but never sober. She trusted her own intelligence more than her caution. And most importantly, she believed the men she destroyed would never talk to each other. Ethan smiled for the first time in months. If you're still watching right now, this is the moment to subscribe, because what Ethan does next turns the hunter into the hunted. Over the next 6 weeks, Ethan rebuilt himself in silence, not publicly, strategically. He took temp work under a false name. He paid off small debts to regain limited credibility. With Nathan's help, he contacted 2 other survivors, men who had lost careers, families, and the courage to speak. At first, they refused. Then Ethan sent them proof. Leela's voice, her laughter, her confession. One by one, they responded. Fear turned into anger. Anger turned into resolve. Meanwhile, Leela thrived. Ethan watched her on social media from burner accounts. New condo, new circle, charity events, interviews where she spoke about resilience after toxic relationships. She wore white a lot now, like innocence could be curated. She even changed her bio. Advocate for emotional abuse survivors. Ethan almost admired the audacity. Almost. The plan wasn't revenge. Ethan made that decision early. Revenge would let her play the victim again. What he wanted was something far more dangerous. Recognition. He wanted the world to see Leela the way her victims had after it was too late. The moral burned clear in his mind. Some people don't deserve forgiveness. They deserve exposure. And the ending they earned. One night, as Ethan closed his laptop, a notification popped up on his burner phone. Unknown number. I know you're watching. A second message followed. Careful, Ethan. You're not as invisible as you think. His smile faded. Leela wasn't done. And now she knew he wasn't either. Ethan read the message again, slower this time. I know you're watching. The words weren't angry. They were playful. That scared him more than any threat. Leela didn't warn people when she was afraid. She warned them when she was already 3 moves ahead. Ethan powered off the burner phone and sat in the dark motel room, listening to the hum of the air conditioner. For the first time since this began, doubt crept in, not about her guilt, but about his own survival. He understood something now that most people never did. Leela didn't panic when plans were exposed. She adapted. The next morning, the first domino fell. Nathan didn't show up. They were supposed to meet at a storage unit on the outskirts of Worcester, a place Nathan used to keep physical copies of everything. When Ethan arrived, the unit door was open. Inside, boxes were overturned, files gone, the hard drive missing, and spray painted on the concrete wall in neat black letters. Let it go. Ethan's chest tightened. Nathan wasn't careless. This wasn't a random theft. It was a message, clean, confident, intentional. Leela was closing the net. Ethan drove away slowly, forcing himself not to look back. Panic would make him sloppy, and sloppy was how men ended up in the red folders. By evening, Nathan finally called. She came to me, Nathan said, voice hoarse. Didn't threaten, didn't shout, just talked. What did she say? Ethan asked. That she forgives me, Nathan replied, bitter laugh cracking through the line. Said she understands trauma, offered to help me heal. Ethan closed his eyes. That was her favorite move. Moral high ground. Always. She also told me, Nathan continued, that if I keep helping you, my past becomes public. Every bad decision, every lie, she has it all. Are you okay? Ethan asked quietly. A pause. No, Nathan said, but I'm still here. That mattered more than Nathan knew. Leela didn't just destroy lives, she tested loyalty. Anyone who stayed standing after her warning became dangerous. Which meant Ethan's time was running out. Over the next week, the pressure intensified. A false tip sent police to Ethan's temp job. His supervisor stopped calling him in. A letter arrived accusing him of harassment, unsigned, but detailed enough to cause problems if it escalated. And then came the call from his mother. They came by the house, she said, frightened. A woman, very polite. She said she was worried about you. Ethan's stomach dropped. Did she say her name? Yes, his mother whispered. Leela. That crossed a line Ethan hadn't known still existed. Mom, he said gently, forcing calm into his voice. Whatever she says, do not trust her. She cried, his mother said. She said she still loves you. Ethan clenched his jaw. That was the cruelty of it. Leela didn't need violence. She used emotion like acid, dissolving trust wherever it touched. After the call ended, Ethan sat alone for a long time. Then he made the hardest decision of his life. He stopped hiding. If silence had protected Leela for years, then noise was the only weapon left. Ethan and Nathan contacted an investigative journalist named Claire Morgan. She had built her career on exposing financial predators and psychological cons, and she didn't scare easily. They didn't tell her everything at once. They told her just enough. Claire listened, asked precise questions. Then she leaned back and said, if even half of this is true, this isn't a scandal. It's a system. She demanded proof, not stories, not emotions. Receipts. That's when Ethan did something Leela never expected. He baited her. Using an old encrypted email account she thought she controlled, Ethan sent a message posing as a new target, wealthy, cautious, curious. Leela replied within hours. The tone was flawless, warm, intelligent, empathetic. Over the next few days, she talked about trust, about starting over, about how she hated men who abused power. Ethan recorded everything, then he pushed. He mentioned knowing someone who had been ruined unfairly, someone whose life had been destroyed by false accusations. Leela didn't hesitate. Some men deserve to be erased, she wrote. The world is cleaner without them. That sentence changed everything. Claire's team verified the recordings, traced shell accounts, connected timelines. Slowly, a picture formed, one that didn't rely on Ethan's name at all. It relied on Leela's. If you're still watching this unfold, subscribe now, because this is the point where truth stops being quiet. But Leela felt it. 2 days later, Ethan received a final message from her. You think exposure scares me? Another followed. I survive exposure. I don't survive boredom. Then the real threat arrived. A restraining order request filed against Ethan. Accusations of stalking, manipulation, obsession. She painted him as a man unable to let go, spiraling into delusion. It was brilliant. If she won, everything he shared would look like revenge fiction. Claire called him immediately. She's trying to discredit you before the story drops. Ethan nodded, already expecting it. She taught me well, he said. What do we do? Claire asked. Ethan looked at the city lights through the motel window. We don't react, he said. We wait. Because the final step of Leela's pattern was always the same. When she felt untouchable, she got careless. And Ethan knew exactly how to let her hang herself. The question wasn't whether she'd fall. It was how loud the fall would be. And who would be watching when it happened. Leela's biggest mistake was believing control meant certainty. She had spent years shaping outcomes, bending people, scripting endings. And because it had always worked, she assumed it always would. That confidence made her predictable. Ethan didn't sleep much after the restraining order filing. Not because he was afraid of her, but because he was waiting. Waiting for the moment when pressure would force her to prove her power out loud. That moment came sooner than expected. Claire called him at dawn. She's moving money. Fast. How fast? Ethan asked. 6 accounts in 48 hours. Different names. Same pattern. Ethan closed his eyes. That was it. Leela only shifted funds when she felt exposed. She didn't run. She rearranged the board so she could still win. She's preparing an exit, Ethan said. Or a show. They decided to accelerate. Claire's team filed public records, requests tied to the shell companies. Not accusations, just questions. The kind that made lawyers nervous. Within hours, Leela responded not legally, but personally. Ethan's burner phone rang. He let it go to voicemail. Her voice filled the room, smooth and amused. I almost admire this, she said. You lasted longer than most, but you're confusing attention with power. Pause. I can still end you. Ethan replayed the message twice, not for fear, for tone. She wasn't angry. She was entertained. That was dangerous. Instead of responding, Ethan did something simpler. He leaked one verified document to Claire, just one. A wire transfer connecting Leela to Julian Parker's collapse. The article didn't name Leela. It asked a question. Who benefits when powerful men fall the same way? The internet did the rest. Speculation exploded. Reddit threads. financial blogs, amateur investigators connecting dots Claire's team hadn't published yet. Leela watched the noise grow, and she couldn't stand not being the loudest voice in the room. 2 nights later, she hosted a charity gala. Invitation only. Influencers. Cameras everywhere. Ethan watched the live stream from his motel bed, heart steady. Leela stood at the podium in a white dress, glowing under soft lights. "I believe in accountability," she said, "in giving survivors a voice." The irony was surgical. Then she did what Ethan had been waiting for. She went off script. "There's a narrative forming online," Leela continued, smile thinning. "About me, about my past. Let me be clear." The room leaned in. "I have helped expose men who hid behind privilege," she said. "Men who deserved to lose everything." Ethan leaned forward. Claire's text came through. "She's talking too much." Leela lifted her glass. "If that makes me a villain, so be it. I don't regret a thing." That sentence ended her. Within minutes, clips spread, her words detached from context, raw and undeniable. "I don't regret a thing." Claire's team released the next piece. Names, timelines, audio, Leela's voice laughing. "I don't just take money, I take identities." The backlash was instant and violent. Sponsors pulled out mid-event. Phones lit up. Faces in the crowd shifted from admiration to calculation. Leela saw it happening. For the first time, her smile cracked. She left the stage early. By morning, her accounts were frozen not by accusation, but by scrutiny. Lawyers called, boards resigned, invitations vanished. Ethan expected relief. What he felt instead was weight. Because this wasn't over. People like Leela didn't collapse quietly. They detonated. That night, Nathan called, breathless. "She's blaming you publicly. Says you manipulated everything." "I know," Ethan said. "She's filed another complaint. This time criminal." "I know," Ethan repeated. "Why are you so calm?" Nathan asked. Ethan stared at the ceiling. "Because she's following the pattern," he said. "And there's only one move left." Leela couldn't run. She couldn't charm. She couldn't control the story anymore. So she would try to destroy the source. Ethan. The moral was clear now. When truth threatens a manipulator, they reveal themselves by how far they're willing to go. And Leela was about to go too far. Ethan's phone buzzed with one final message from her. "No more games. Meet me. Location attached. A private house on the coast. Isolated. Quiet. The kind of place where endings were decided." Ethan didn't hesitate. He replied with 2 words. "I'm coming." The house on the coast looked calm in a way that felt dishonest. It sat alone above the water, all glass and stone, waves crashing below like applause meant for someone else. No neighbors, no cameras visible from the road, the kind of place designed for privacy and secrets. Ethan arrived just before sunset. He didn't bring a weapon. He didn't bring backup. What he brought was far more dangerous. Truth. Inside, the house smelled like citrus and expensive wood. Leela was already there, standing by the window with a glass of wine, watching the ocean as if it owed her something. "You actually came," she said without turning around. "You asked," Ethan replied. She smiled. "Most men don't." He noticed then how tired she looked. Not weak, not broken, just worn like someone who had been holding too many masks for too long. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the couch. "Let's end this like adults." Ethan didn't sit. "You ruined lives," he said, "and you called it accountability." Leela finally turned to face him. "I corrected balances. You destroyed people who trusted you." "That was their mistake," she said calmly. "Power always punishes trust." Ethan studied her, really studied her, and understood something that had taken him years to accept. Leela didn't see herself as cruel. She saw herself as necessary. "You think what you did was justice," Ethan said. "But justice doesn't hide." Leela laughed softly. "Neither does stupidity. You think the world cares about truth. They care about stories, and I tell better ones." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You could still walk away. I'll disappear. New name, new country, and you get your silence back." Ethan shook his head. "That's the one thing I won't give you." Her eyes hardened. "Then you leave me no choice." She reached for her phone. Ethan spoke quickly. "Before you call anyone, listen." He pulled out his phone and placed it on the table between them. "I recorded everything," he said. "Not just tonight. Every message. Every confession. This house, too." Leela froze. "You don't have the nerve," she said. "I didn't," Ethan replied. "You gave it to me." For the first time, fear flickered across her face, not panic, but calculation. "You think this makes you powerful?" she asked. "No," Ethan said. "It makes me finished hiding." Outside, the sky darkened. Waves hit the rocks harder now, louder, like the world leaning in. Leela sat down slowly. "You want a moral ending," she said. "A lesson." "I want accountability," Ethan replied, "not revenge." She smiled, then sad, almost nostalgic. "You know what my real mistake was?" she asked. "I underestimated how patient you were." Ethan didn't respond. She leaned back. "Men like you always think surviving makes you righteous." "And people like you," Ethan said, "think control makes you untouchable." Silence filled the room. If you're still here, still listening to this moment, subscribe now, because what happens next is exactly why some endings can't be rewritten. Leela stood and walked toward the door. "I won't be arrested," she said. "You don't have enough." Ethan met her gaze. "I don't need to arrest you." She paused. "What does that mean?" "It means," Ethan said quietly, "I've already sent copies." Her face drained of color. "To journalists," he continued, "to lawyers, to people who don't need my credibility, only yours." For the first time, Leela's voice trembled. "You're bluffing." Ethan shook his head. "You taught me never to bluff." Her phone buzzed, then again, and again. She looked down at the screen and knew. This wasn't a leak. It was a release. Leela sank back into the chair, staring at nothing. "You've ruined me," she whispered. Ethan felt no triumph, only truth. "You did that yourself," he said. Outside, sirens echoed faintly along the coast road, not for her, not yet, but close enough to feel inevitable. Leela looked up at him one last time. You think this makes you better than me? Ethan thought of his mother, of the men in the red folders, of the years stolen. No, he said, it just means I stopped letting you decide the ending. He turned and walked out of the house, leaving the door open behind him. The ocean roared, and for the first time, Leela Hart had nothing left to control. The ocean air hit Ethan's face like a wake-up call as he stepped outside the house. He didn't run. He didn't look back. He just walked down the long stone path toward his car, every step feeling heavier and lighter at the same time. Behind him, Leela Hart's world was collapsing quietly. By morning, it was public. Not rumors, not threads, headlines. Audio clips played on major networks. Her words, calm, confident, cruel, looped endlessly. Financial records followed. Timelines aligned. Men who had stayed silent for years finally spoke, no longer alone, no longer ashamed. Leela's name stopped meaning elegance. It started meaning exposure. Ethan watched the news from a small apartment he'd rented under his real name for the first time in years. When the anchor said, "Former consultant Leela Hart," he exhaled slowly. Former. Claire called an hour later. She's lawyered up, she said, but it won't save her reputation. Too many receipts, too many voices. And the charges? Ethan asked. Civil cases first, Claire replied. Criminal investigations are opening. It'll take time. Time. Ethan had learned patience the hard way. Leela never went to prison that year, but prison came to her anyway. Every account frozen. Every board seat revoked. Friends disappeared overnight. The charity world erased her name like it had never existed. The invitations stopped. The applause stopped. And worst of all for someone like her, the attention stopped. She tried to speak once, a carefully written statement about misunderstandings and targeted harassment. It was ignored. The world had moved on to the next scandal. She was no longer the narrator. She was the footnote. Months passed. Ethan's cases unraveled one by one. Not quickly, not cleanly, but steadily. Firms settled quietly. Articles corrected records. His name stopped being poisonous. One evening, his mother called. I'm proud of you, she said. No hesitation this time. Ethan closed his eyes. That was the moment he finally won. Not when Leela fell, but when trust came back. Nathan rebuilt his life too. Slowly, imperfectly. The men in the red folders weren't erased, but they weren't alone anymore. Support groups formed. Lawsuits connected dots. Silence broke. And Leela, she moved. New city, new hair, new name. But the past followed her like a shadow that didn't need light. Because the internet never forgets. One afternoon, nearly a year later, Ethan received a message from an unknown number. I see people still believe you, it read. Must be nice. Ethan stared at the screen. He didn't reply. Some endings didn't need answers. He walked outside, sunlight warm on his face, and realized something simple and permanent. Leela hadn't lost because Ethan was smarter. She lost because she believed control was stronger than truth. And truth waits. That was the moral she never understood. You can destroy a life with lies, but you can only live with them alone. Ethan looked ahead, not backward, because the ending she deserved wasn't prison or poverty or pain. It was irrelevance. And the ending he deserved was quieter. Peace. If you stayed until the very end of this story, subscribe, because not every ending comes with justice, but every action earns a consequence, and this one finally did.